Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, the Knife Raven here, back again with another video, and in today's video, I will be taking a look at an otter knife that I have been very much anticipating, that being the Bergmann. Now, the Otter Bergmann is a very interesting piece that originally came out in the beginning of this year, 2024. It's already won an award, that being the second place in the classics category at the IWA Knife Awards. And needless to say, I think it's very much worth that hype, if you will. You see, the Bergmann is a knife that originally was based off of the Webermesser, the 180 pattern knife here. And this is one of Otter's oldest knives. Again, a company that's been around since the 1840s, you can imagine that this knife is well over 150 years old as a design. It was originally favored in ribbon weaving mills due to its fine point, straight edge, ease of sharpening, and you can imagine a blade such as a Wharncliffe would allow for very nice detail work that could be helpful in that sort of environment. Now, the Webermesser was a knife that I originally very much liked. As some of you may know, I am very much taken with Wharncliffe swaybacks. However, this knife came with a very substantial flaw, one that I found very difficult to look past. And that is a warp. A very substantial warp in the blade. And this is not just an off-center blade, but rather a bent cutting edge, which will lead to you getting uneven cuts and just generally worse performance from the knife, aside from just cosmetically looking rather poor. But despite this, when I heard that they were making a knife off of this pattern, but giving it a new set of materials, I was very much interested. But I was sold on the knife once I read up on the inspiration behind its design. This knife, the Bergmann, is a bit of an ode to the Bergisches land and its surrounding mining industry. You see, Bergmann means miner in German, and because of that, a lot of the elements of this knife, the materials, are inspired by the local mining product. So without further ado, let's take a look at the knife, but before that, here is the box that it came in. Plain cardboard with the Otter logo. This is a newer one to me. 180 pattern, EBE, which I presume stands for Ebony, Webermesser, Ebenholz, Fat Carbon Bakken, which is referring to the bolster, which is in carbon fiber. The blade is, of course, carbon steel, C75, just like the rest of Otter's carbon blades. So, here is the Bergmann. Now, immediately, you will notice the very nice inky black ebony wood here. Ebony is, in my eyes, a very reliable choice for a knife handle. Has a very close grain. It's very smooth, takes a polish very well, and can be really enhanced with just a few drops of mineral oil. And it's very comfortable in the hand, very smooth to the touch. One thing you might notice is that this knife is fixed with copper pins. This is very unusual, as most knives feature either brass pins or steel pins. But the copper gives a very distinct look that really no other knife that I own has. I have one other knife in copper from Otter, coincidentally, and it's this small Mercator with a full copper handle, single piece of folded metal with your blade and lanyard loop fixed with steel rivets. But even this knife does not have copper pins. So this is a bit of an anomaly in my collection. especially when you consider the bolster material. This is carbon fiber that has been mixed with copper. You can see the actual detailing, the lines in the material. That is genuine copper, which I think blends beautifully with the pins and just overall creates a very nice look. This is somewhat unusual, again, for me, as most bolsters are either brass, steel, or most commonly nickel-silver. So getting a knife with a carbon fiber bolster and copper pins has already checked 2 separate boxes in terms of the unique factor that the knife wields. One difference between this and the Webermesser also is that the Bergmann has a lanyard hull, whereas the Webermesser does not. I don't typically use lanyards, but it's nice to know if that's something that interests you. The option is always there. Again, this knife is a Wharncliffe swayback, meaning it has a fairly distinct design. Wharncliffe swaybacks have gone by many different names that I can point to alone. For example, Case in the US refers to it as their swayback gent. In the UK, these knives are typically known as tackler knives, but the terms Wharncliffe swayback are typically well established for this particular pattern. Again, this is a carbon steel blade. No patina on it yet. I haven't used it enough to accumulate one, but it has a nice satin finish. A little bit of oil on it as well. Just wipe off here. Very nice slender profile. It is again virtually identical to the original 180 pattern. The main differences are just the materials being used for the handle, the pins, and the bolster. Do some quick measurements here, starting with the overall length, which is coming in at just a bit over 6¼ inches. The blade is coming in at just over 2¾ inches. And the cutting edge is 2½. So, yeah, 2¾ and 2½ on the cutting edge. So, this should be very much a UK legal knife. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am no lawyer. Please do not take my suggestions and opinions as legal advice. Please contact a lawyer who actually can give you an accurate response. But as far as I know, this should be a UK legal carry. Have a nail nick here, but the knife can easily be pinched open as well. Enough of it is sticking out. Oh. Hands are still a little oily, however, so that could be a problem. So more about the Bergmann. The reason that this really caught my fancy, aside from the immediate appearance of it and the fact that it's a pattern I very much like, this knife is a bit of an ode to the Bergisches land and the local mining industry that was very present there. The materials used are reflections of that, and in the ways that coal mining was very popular in the Ruhr region, which, from what I gather, is not terribly far away. And the ebony handle here is a bit of a callback to that coal mining, given its coloration. The copper pins and linings of the carbon fiber bolster are references to the copper seams that can be found in coal. And, well, that gives the knife a very distinct look, for one, and also a bit of an interesting inspiration history. One thing about this knife that I will say is that it is probably the very best fit and finished Otter knife I have, to the point where it somewhat shocked me. Most of Otter's knives are very well made. Take, for example, this anchor knife here. This knife is very well put together. It's built like a tank. No blade play whatsoever. Just a very well-made, rugged knife. However, if you want to be very picky, you could argue that there seems to be some extremely minimal gapping in the liners here. Now, while that doesn't bother me, it's certainly still something that one could complain about. The Bergmann has somehow managed to achieve an even higher standard. Starting off with the back itself, you can see that there is virtually no gapping here. I'll hold it up to the light. Nothing is shining through, so I can safely say there is no gapping on this knife whatsoever. The entire back is very smooth. Nothing is raised, proud, or sharp. The same can be said on the bottom. The blade is almost perfectly down the center, actually. That is directly centered, unless my eyes deceive me. It's certainly not anywhere close to the liners. The pins are all very, very flush. Nothing catching, nothing's raised or sticking up on either side. The transition from the handle to the bolster is perfect. Obviously, the difference in texture will be a bit of a giveaway, but aside from that, you couldn't feel this transition if it weren't for the textile difference in the material. Beautifully done. The spring is flush. Not flush in the half-stop position, but bear in mind that is not something that could be considered a flaw, as not all knives are actually made that way. No blade play in any direction whatsoever. The stamp for Solingen, Germany is very clear and concise. The etch for Otter's logo is very well done. And the nail nick is very finely ground. The edge on this knife is very well done. This is a flat grind, of course. I've also found that Otter's C75 steel is very easy to resharpen. This is the factory edge, however. I will attempt a cutting test and hope I don't bend the paper in the process. Very, very nice edge. Perhaps not a 10 out of 10, but will certainly be usable straight out of the box. Another thing that the Bergmann has that the Webermesser wasn't particularly strong with was the half stop. I remarked on the fact that the Webermesser featured this sort of lazy half stop that could sort of be detected, but wasn't really snappy in any real way. But the Bergmann here has a very distinct half stop. So I don't know if that is a design change, or rather the quality control ensured that this had a much cleaner, smoother action. As keep in mind, this knife was made in 2024. This knife was made in 2022. So perhaps 2 years and the quality has gone up consistently and considerably, as I have found that the latest Otter knives that have been made this year and even in the last year, have been considerably better than this. Here's an example, again, of an Otter knife from 2023. This is a Wenge Messer. Simple boy's knife. Carbon blade, spear point, teardrop handle, with a very snappy half stop. So, while I do not have anything to necessarily prove this, if Otter is increasing their quality, they have really come far since this. And if they continue to do so, it won't be long until they are making some of the very best handmade knives on the market. I'm not going to declare them on par with GEC, as that seems to be the current standard for quality. I don't know. I only have 2 GECs. Both of them have blade play, so I might not be the best one to ask. But regardless, the fit and finish on this is excellent. It's centered, it has a good action, there's no blade play, it came sharp out of the box, transitions are flawless, everything is smooth and sanded, there is no gapping to speak of. Just all in all, the workmanship on this knife is unbelievably good. And it's 100 times better than this. So there's also that. Well, I'll do a few comparisons here with other Wharncliffe swaybacks of similar style. Here's the Bergmann next to probably one of the most well-known Wharncliffe swaybacks, the Case swayback gent, which is one of the smallest swaybacks that you can buy. You can see it's quite considerably smaller than the Bergmann in both blade and handle. Here is the Bergmann next to a custom swayback from Mr. Michael May of Sheffield, England. You can see this is a lot closer in terms of dimension. The Michael May is a bit broader, although the blade itself with the swedging does look a bit thinner. Here is the Bergmann next to, I suppose, one of the standard comparisons I do on the channel. Here it is next to an Ettrick. And while the Ettrick has the very thin, very long handle, overall dimension, these knives are very, very similar in their overall length. And why not? I'll put it next to another tackler knife. This is a Senator by Arthur Wright. The blade's been a little reprofiled so it looks more like a sheepfoot. But again, these are very, very consistent in terms of dimension with one another. And here it is with a tackler from Joseph Rogers. You can see the Rogers is a bit smaller. So, overall, this is absolutely exemplary. I don't have much else to say, really, about it. This knife features materials that I'd say are very high quality. Again, the carbon fiber is beautiful. The pins are unique. Ebony wood, you can't go wrong with it. Otter's C75 steel sharpens up nicely, takes a good edge, and is really all you need for day-to-day use. Not unless you're doing something ridiculous. You don't need a super steel, so this will get the job done, most definitely. The action is beautiful. I'd say it's probably the ideal for me, as it's snappy, but not uncomfortable. I'm not afraid of breaking a nail when I open this knife, but I'm also not afraid of it closing on me. I'd give it a solid 7 on the pull scale. Definitely lighter than most Sheffield knives, but stiffer than your average case. But beautiful action, nice steel, good profile for the blade, comfortable handle, fits well, has a nice grip in the hand. Again, bear in mind I have fairly medium-sized hands. This might be a little bit small to some, might be a little bit big to some, but I think it really fits the Goldilocks requirement, if you will. But very nice design, tried and tested. It's been around for well over 100 years, based off of one of Otter's very oldest knives, made in the same way that all of Otter's other knives are, and if the quality is anything to go off of, I think they are raising their standards and improving their craft, which is something that always delights me to see. As in a world of factory-made everything, seeing handmade knives that are not only consistent, but becoming better and better over the years is something that really makes me happy to see. So again, I might have just gotten a good one, but this is an outstanding knife. Lanyard hull, ebony, copper pins, carbon fiber bolster, carbon steel Wharncliffe blade, half stops, beautiful fit and finish, excellent craftsmanship, made in Germany, in Solingen by Otter Messer. That's really all there is to say. So I bought this at one of my favorite retailers for Otter knives, that being moonrakerknives.co.uk. Again, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just very much enjoy their service. I think that they have an excellent selection of traditional knives and very reasonable prices, all things considered. This knife cost me around £65, although granted, it will be a bit more expensive for those living in the UK, as I didn't have to pay the VAT. So there is that. For my buyers outside of the UK, this will cost a little bit less, and I think it's probably the cheapest price on the Bergmann that I'm aware of. I know directly from Otter this knife is around 92 euro, so quite a bit higher. But with the conversion and with shipping, this cost around 115 Canadian, which for this degree of craftsmanship, for these materials, I think is a really excellent price. Otter knives have never been cheap to get in Canada. They're actually quite expensive from my local retailers. But if you happen to get them, whether that's locally or overseas, they are excellent knives. I think that their quality is improving. And they have a very nice selection too. If this is a bit too small for you, consider a large anchor. If it's too chunky for you, consider a Mercator. But really, they have a very nice selection of traditional knives. They're all made by hand in Germany in their workshop. And it's a brand that I would very much recommend. I'm very happy with my Otter collection, and I believe this brings me up to, what is it now? 9 Otter knives, if I can recall. Yeah, this is my 9th Otter, so the collection's starting to expand, and by all means, I will be buying more Otter knives in the future. So the Bergmann, or the Minor, is an excellent knife. I don't really have any complaints. I think the fit and finish is outstanding, and the materials just look beautiful. It's a very elegant knife, very sleek. So, yeah, I'd give this a good, solid 9 or even 10 out of 10. Excellent knife. Very happy to have it in the collection, and I'm looking forward to seeing if Otter releases any updated versions of old patterns. I know they did the Draco, which is the 3-rivet knife featuring blue poplar wood. Absolutely beautiful knife. And if they're going to be doing some more updated versions of old designs, then I will be very much keeping an eye out for that. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I have greatly enjoyed talking about this knife, and if you've made it to the end of the video, thank you for sticking around. I know it's been a bit longer than I would intend, but this has been the Otter Messer Bergmann, and this has been the Knife Raven, as always, signing off. Goodbye.